Okay, so when you think about the start of the American Revolution, what's the first thing you picture? For pretty much all of us, it's this image of a single guy on a horse, right? A lone hero galloping through the night shouting that the British are coming. That man, of course, is Paul Revere. But what if I told you that the story we all grew up with is more of a myth than reality?
I mean, this image right here, it's basically burned into our collective memory. It's this powerful symbol of one person's courage against these incredible odds. The lone rider racing against time with the fate of a nation on his shoulders. It is a fantastic story. The only problem is, it's not really the whole story.
These lines, they're from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's famous poem from 1861, and they are pretty much the reason we have this legendary version of the story. Now, Longfellow, an incredible poet, but he wasn't exactly a historian. He created a myth that was meant to inspire a country that was about to tear itself apart in the Civil War. And in doing that, he kind of smoothed over a reality that was way more complicated and honestly, a lot more interesting.
So, let's peel back the layers of this legend. To get down to the truth, we're going to ask 3 really simple questions that go right to the heart of the myth. First things first, was Paul Revere really riding all by himself? The poem sure makes it sound that way, painting him as this one-man show carrying a world-changing message.
Yeah? The answer is a big, resounding no. Not even close. Revere was actually a really important piece of a much bigger, much smarter alarm system. See, another guy, a tanner named William Dawes, was sent out on a totally different route, and later they were joined by a doctor, Samuel Prescott. So the real story isn't about one lone hero, it was a team effort, a whole network. And a network, as you know, is always going to be stronger and more effective than just one person.
Okay, so he wasn't alone, but he still made it to Concord to warn everybody, right? I mean, that was the whole point of the ride.
Well, this might be the biggest shocker of them all. Paul Revere was captured. A British patrol stopped him, questioned him, and they took his horse. He never actually made it to Concord. The person who successfully finished the mission was Dr. Samuel Prescott, the other guy who joined them on the way. He's the one who got through the British patrol and carried the warning all the way to Concord. So think about that for a second. The guy who was the hero of the most critical part of the journey is not the name we all remember.
All right, last question for this part. Was the warning itself even correct? The legend says the British were on their way to arrest the Founding Fathers Samuel Adams and John Hancock.
Turns out this was another big piece of the story that wasn't quite right. While the Patriots were definitely worried about their leaders, the actual British orders show that arresting Adams and Hancock wasn't the main goal. No, the real mission was to capture and destroy the colonial weapons and gunpowder that were being stashed in Concord. So the ride was absolutely necessary, but the intelligence that kicked the whole thing off was based on a flawed assumption.
So if the legend is so wrong, what's the real story? Well, it's not really about the rider. It's about the man who sent him, Dr. Joseph Warren. And his story is all about that critical choice that we all have to face. The choice between analyzing forever and actually making a decision.
You see, Dr. Warren wasn't acting on some single, perfect tip from a secret source. He was piecing things together over time. For weeks, he was getting all these messy, incomplete bits of information. Scouts poking around Concord, elite troops being pulled off duty, longboats being prepped. I mean, each piece by itself was kind of vague, but when you put them all together, they started to paint a really, really troubling picture.
And this brings us right to the core of it. Warren was facing that classic problem. He could wait for that one perfect, confirmed piece of intel, the kind that almost never actually comes, and risk being way too late, or he could act on the imperfect information he had, knowing full well it might be a false alarm. So what'd he do? He didn't just sit around waiting for another message. His biographer says he went down to the docks himself. He saw the British troops gathering and the boats moving into place with his own 2 eyes. He got his own confirmation. He was the one who closed that gap between uncertainty and action.
And that was the absolute genius of their system. It wasn't built to be perfect. It was built for action. You gather messy info, you send out a rider just in case, you go get direct confirmation yourself, and then you unleash a whole network of messengers to make sure the word gets out. They didn't fear uncertainty, they built a system designed to beat it with speed.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Why does retelling this story even matter today?
Well, it's about this powerful mental trap that Dr. Warren managed to avoid, a trap that's maybe more relevant now than ever in our age of information overload.
In historical research, there's this idea called premature cognitive commitment,
I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a simple trap. It's when you decide on your answer way too early, and then you only look for information that proves you're right, while you ignore anything that suggests you might be wrong. It's kind of like putting on intellectual blinders.
Dr. Warren did the complete opposite. He didn't get locked into one single theory. He didn't wait for one perfect source. He gathered all the messy evidence, he stayed flexible, and when that evidence hit a critical point, confirmed by his own eyes, he acted with incredible speed and decisiveness.
It reminds me of that classic piece of advice for anyone who feels stuck on a really complex problem. The best antidote to the paralysis of writer's block is simply to start writing.
And that right there is the true lesson of April 18th, 1775. The Patriots understood that waiting for the perfect plan, for perfect intelligence, was a recipe for disaster. They knew that the antidote to overanalyzing, the antidote to tyranny, was action. It was to ride.
So it leaves all of us with a final question. In our own lives where we're surrounded by endless data, countless opinions, and infinite choices, how do we know when we have enough information? When is it time to stop analyzing and, just like Dr. Warren, take that big step and just act?